G'day, I'm Mark Hoth and welcome to Swift Almanac. Welcome to the last lesson in our login tutorials. I've deprecated my last Facebook login tutorial, which was the clunky Facebook hasn't updated their API for iOS 11 yet version. So now, a month after iOS 11 has been released, Facebook has finally updated their Swift API. Of course, the code now works, but the instructions are still in iOS 9. Not even 10, but iOS 9. So that means don't follow their instructions. Watch carefully for all the tips and how-tos because installation is a nightmare. Also, I'm using the Xcode 9.1 beta, and there are a few small changes in 9.1, which means further changes to the Facebook API. Luckily, I'm here to guide you through the swamp. It does, however, highlight that if you are using third-party APIs, you run the risk that they will not be updated, or worse, the company will fold and you can't get any further updates. So don't put all your eggs in one basket, just another great reason why Firebase is a good solution. Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to download the code, and I'm running the Xcode beta 9.1. So we go to source control and we want to clone Swift Almanac login 6. And if you want the final version, then that's login 7, and you're going to want a copy of that because it contains the Facebook login graphic that you'll want to use for the Facebook button. So once we've got our login 6 downloaded, we want to go to developer.facebook.com, and we're also going to want to go to the console for Firebase. Okay, so under Facebook, you need to be a developer. That's free, and you want to set up an app. You just go create new app. You type in the name, put your contact email, create app ID, fill in this, and you want to set up a Facebook login for your new app for iOS, and then it starts giving you these instructions. So we'll leave the Facebook page there and we'll go back to the Firebase console, and we've got our login application that we were using previously, and if we go to authentication and then we go to sign in method, we need to enable Facebook sign in, and that will require us to get an app ID and an app secret from our Facebook developer area, and we also want to copy this OAuth redirect URI. So we'll go back to our Facebook app and we'll go click on the dashboard. In fact, we'll click on I think it's Facebook login. Valid OAuth redirects, and just paste that in there and save changes, and perhaps go back to quick start. Okay, so it says to I'm not sure where to do it really. Let's look at the documentation from Swift Almanac, from Firebase. Guides, authentication, Facebook, login. Okay, so add Firebase to your iOS project. We've already done that in our previous tutorial. If you haven't connected your app to your Firebase project, do that from the Firebase console, and we've previously done that. On the Facebook for developers, get the app ID and the app secret for your app. So in our case, if we go to settings, so we've got our app ID, and we can show and get our app secret. So you can put those in your notebook. And then enable Facebook login. I've showed you how to do that in the sign up method. Enter the Facebook sign in method and specify the app ID and app secret that you got from Firebase. Now I'm going to zip back to my Swift Almanac, which is the one that works. And I don't care if you know my app secret, because this is just a test application and I don't use it in real life. And then I add the app ID and the app secret here in Firebase, and then we save that. So we've done all this first bit here, and then it gives us some code which is not very useful at all. However, somewhere, integrate Facebook login into your app by following the developer's documentation. Okay, so we click on this, and Facebook in the developer section has got an area for iOS. Now this is not the area for Swift, this is the area for iOS. Now it does have some useful information, but iOS is really referring to Objective-C builds, and somewhere in here, maybe it's no, I'm not sure. Anyway, I found it the other day. So, it mentions iOS 9. This is for iOS 9, and so it's not very useful. So what do we need to do? What do we need to do? Right, the first thing we need to do is we need to go to our pod file, and we need to add some pods. So in your Xcode project, there's a pod file here, or you can go into, in fact, I'll do that. So I'll go into my project. There's a pod file, and I will edit it. And I want to add a pod called Facebook Core. And I want to add a pod called Facebook Login. There's a third pod called Facebook Share. We're not using that, and it was broken previously. I haven't tested it, so I'm not going to add it in this time. So once you've created that pod file, then you need to type pod install, and that will install everything that we need. However, oh no, this time it's actually done it. Maybe it's been updated. If you get 0.2.0 instead of 0.3.0, then I'll show you how to fix that, because that's what happened to me yesterday when I did my trial run. We're just waiting for sending stats to finish. Okay, so what you might need to do, and this is an interesting thing about pod files, is you can set what the version is. So by putting comma, brace, tilde, that arrow 0.3. What that's saying is that I want to get the version out of the database that is at least version 3. It will take version 3.1, 3.2, 3.4, everything as long as this value here doesn't go to 4. So it won't, if there was a version 4 that came out, this code is not going to download it. Now, if you're using a non-version related, it's going to take what is the current active version. And yesterday when I did this, the current active version was 0.2, but 0.3 existed because it was probably still in beta or they hadn't updated it yet. But this is a way that pod files allow you to get access to alpha and beta releases prior to them being made the stable version of the software. And just to make sure I've got the syntax correct, I will install that again. Yes, okay, we're all good. And it still is downloading version 0.30. Okay, so now we've got our pod file and we've got FB, SDK, core kit, login kit, and the pods are installed. So we've got everything there. We should build this. Oh, we're not going too badly. Okay, so we need to get these working. Now in 9.1, characters has been deprecated out of strings. You get this warning saying characters deprecated. Please use string or substring directly. And basically all we need to do, unlock these files and just remove the character reference in 2 instances, and we will rebuild again. Okay, and now we're getting this block declaration is not a prototype, and that's basically because we need to unlock the files. It's basically because the empty parentheses should have void set in them, so we need to find all instances of that and unlock the file and place void inside. Okay, so now we've built without errors. We still have this error that we haven't placed an app icon with a 1024 by 1024 image, but don't worry about that. While we are here, we're going to use a login graphic, which I'm going to get from the completed project. So I'm going to show that in the Finder. And so if you download Login 7, you'll be able to do exactly this. You get the Facebook image set and you just copy it. And you get the 1 times, 2 times, and 3 times version. So now we've got an image called Facebook. So we'll go back to our sudo instructions, and we need to enable in Facebook, we need to put our bundle ID in, and we need to enable single sign-on. So there's our bundle ID, and we've enabled single sign-on, and this is under settings basic. We need to configure our info plist, which is always a challenge. So we need to copy and paste this XML here. Make sure you don't overblow into the next system, and in our info plist we want to open as source code, and then where we've got these CF bundle URL types, we want to paste another one in. And if you use any of the Facebook dialogues, e.g. login, which we're using, we also need to copy and paste this Swift Almanac, and we just put that straight after it. And now we get to the interesting stuff, because the code, as you can see, is in Objective-C and not Swift. So essentially what happens is when you hit the login button, it goes off to Facebook, and then it needs to come back to your application, and it does that through these URL settings. It passes back your Facebook app ID, and that way messages will get sent to app delegate, and in app delegate we have this open URL, and we also have the did finish launching with options. There's a website called Swiftify, which we'll go to. And we want to convert from Objective-C to Swift. We want to be using Swift 4, and it gives us this nice import and copy of our functions. And while it does look nice to start off with, it's a bit of a nightmare because these are functions for iOS 9. Okay, so we need to import something, but it's not that, it's import Facebook core, and then we've got this application did finish launching with options. Well, we've already got one of those, so we just take this code, or this line of code, which is the code inside the method function, and this is essentially an initializer to tell our application that we want to be dealing with the Facebook API. The problem is that this is not actually the name of the Facebook method anymore. It's now called SDK application delegate, and it's not called .shared instance. I think it's just called .shared. It's a property, not a method anymore. I think that's all we need to do to change that part to be correct. And then we've got this other open URL method function. So let's copy and paste that out and paste it in here. So essentially similar story. It's not called FB SDK, it's just called SDK application dot, it's just called shared, and its property. So that's a singleton. If you're not quite sure what singletons are or how they operate, then check out my singletons YouTube tutorial. It only goes for about 10 or 15 minutes. It's well worth watching. And then the source application and annotations have changed. Look, basically, this is what the code is now. These source application and annotation have been passed in this options parameter. So we just need to pass the options through, and what we need to do is, if it's not handled, because we're getting this Boolean value back, so if it's not handled, then we want to talk to Google. So we'll try Facebook to see if we're automatically logged on with Facebook, or if Facebook is sending us a "you're about to log in" or "you're not about to log in" message. And if it's not handled or handled, if it's not handled, then we'll give Google a chance, and that means that we're returning true, or you can just leave it as return handled, and we can get rid of this copy. Now, Facebook has a global variable for whether or not you are logged in. So we're going to create a variable FB access token, which is of type access token, and that is going to be an optional because it may never be set. And down here we're just going to set it. VB access token is equal to access token. So the Facebook API will set this after it has loaded, and what this means is if we were previously logged in with Facebook and we've just closed down the app without logging out, then the next time we log in, this is going to have a value. It won't be nil, and that will mean that we're already logged in, so it's sort of like an automatic sign in. Now, we're not up to that part yet. However, if we're automatically logged into Facebook, we are also automatically logged into Firebase, and so current user is also going to be non-nil. And so if the current user is equal to nil, we're going to show the game center. That is, if we're not logged in, not already logged in, then we're going to show our game center and login page. And if we are already, it says authenticated by Google, but that really should be now updated to authenticated by Firebase, which is Google or Facebook, then we're going to move straight to the home screen. So that's what we need to do with the app delegate. Let's look at what else. Hang on a minute, I've got an error. Haha. Dot current. Okay. So whether or not that is current or not is what we actually need for this token. So if we look at our view controllers, our home view controller does have this logout action. And what we need to do if we are logging out is we just check to see if that FB access token is not equal to nil. So if we're logged in with Facebook, then what we need to do is we need to set, in fact what we need to do is we need to import Facebook core. So we need to set the access token dot current to nil, and then we need to set the FB access token internally to nil. And once we've done those two things, that will log us out of Facebook. And when we do the Firebase logout, that is going to log us out of Firebase. And because Firebase is part of the Google Suite, that'll also log us out of Google. Okay, so that's building fine. Let's go to our, get rid of Swiftify, connecting our app delegate, and then it says adding our Facebook login to our code. Okay, so now there's a short way and a long way. There's this thing about asking for permissions, and next step, look, there's, oh God, and there's pretty much absolutely nothing on how to do it. So if you do a search on Swift API, Swift SDK documentation, and we go to login here, it'll give us this code, let login button equals login button, and add subview. It'll show us what it looks like. and how to check the current status, which is what we did in the app delegate, how to ask for permissions, and then there's this section here on doing a custom login button, and this code is kind of what we want. What their button will do is form a grey square, background color dark grey, dark square that says my login button, and it'll center it in the screen, and it'll give it this size of 180 wide and 40 deep. It will add a target to a touch up, so adding a target for a button, and it's going to call this procedure called login button clicked, and then finally it's going to add the subview. And it uses this target function called login button clicked. You ask for a public profile or whatever it is, whatever permissions that you want. You give it the current view controller and it returns a login result. It'll say you failed, you cancelled, so the user has actually clicked the cancel button, or that there's been some success. So we're going to implement a custom button, but we're going to do it in a slightly different way. We're going to follow this roadmap. So we're going to create a button. We're going to give it an image rather than setting a title. We are going to add a target so that we've clicked on it, and we're going to, of course, add the subview. So let's have a look at that. In our login view controller, we might just quickly have a look at what our project looks like. Okay, so here's our login screen, here's our Google button, and what we want to do is we'll put a Facebook button up here, and so we don't want it centered. If we put it centered, it'll be across our email password login area. Now I've just also checked here, we've got the login and the URL types. There's just one, and it's the Facebook one, so Facebook's going to work, but in editing our info plist, we've destroyed one of our Google API, so just add another one in there. And under the Google service, we need the reverse client ID. Okay, so Google sign-in should now still work, just as an aside. Okay, so going back to our login view controller, we need to import Facebook login. So we want to create a Facebook button, which is a UI button. We want to give it a rectangle of space to occupy, and the space it's going to occupy is going to be the view.bounds.width divide 2, so that puts it in the middle, but it's going to have a width of 180, so we need to take half of that width away because this is the left most position where it's going to start. We'll put it 100 down, the width is 180, the height is 40. Then our Facebook button is going to have an image, and we create the image, we entered the image earlier and we called it Facebook. In lowercase, and that's going to be for the normal range. And then we need to add a target. The target is self, the action is hash select or login button clicked, and that's come up because I've already put it in down here, and that's for the normal state. And so we can see it. We will add a subview, view.add subview, and the subview is the Facebook button. UI control events has no member.normal. Oh, no, we want it to be .touch up inside. Okay, so we've got our button. Hopefully it's in the right spot. UI image called Facebook. Log in, build that. So now we should have the Facebook button, and it should click on login and print login. And as I read this, I'm looking at the error messages. A new version of the Google sign-in iOS SDK is available. We will go and have to have a look at that as well. Maybe I'll be redoing another version shortly. Okay, so there's our login with Facebook button, and when we click on it, we're getting this printout of the login. So it might not be in the exact same space or the exact same height as this sign-in, but it's pretty close. So if we look at what we've got here, we've got this login manager and a couple of different cases. So we're calling login manager. Login manager is a Facebook SDK call, and when that returns, you've got a closure here. We're asking for the public profile, which is a small p now because the documentation is not up to scratch, and we send our self not quite sure why that is not working. It's bound to be because we don't have enough braces. That's better. So login manager will call. It's got a closure, and when the login result returns, it will either be failed, cancelled, or successful. Now, if it's successful, there's a couple of things that we want to do, because this is just logging us in to Facebook, and then of course we want to use that to log into Firebase. So just like we did in the Google example, might be under our extensions. Once we got authenticated by Google, we have to get this credential and then use that credential to log in to Firebase. So the way we do that, I'm just going to cut and paste the code. So you notice that we've got the new style .failed, .cancelled, .success, which are all in lowercase. We've got granted permissions and declined permissions, so that when you go to Facebook, people can say, yes, well, the profile you always get, but people can say, yeah, but you can't have my email, or you can't have my age, or my birthday, or things like that. So these are ones that are granted. It's a dictionary. I think maybe it's an array, I can't recall. And there's also this other one here, which is the ones that you didn't receive. Hopefully that's nil, and we print those both out. Now we get this access token returned to us, which is our global variable. So we set our copy of the access token equal to the access token dot current, maybe. Oh, so read permissions dot public profile view controller self, and then trailing closure. Let's see if that likes that instead. Okay, that's better. So in this case, our access token is actually the access token that gets returned. And then this is the Firebase code, which is just the same as the Google sign-in code here. Auth, sign in with credential, but we have this credential is the Google Auth provider. And here, our credential is the Facebook Auth provider. We get our token and our authentication token, and then we just authorize it with Firebase, and if we get an error, we print the error, and otherwise we set our current user equal to, and that's our current Firebase user, equal to the returned user value, and then we move to the home screen. So let's see if this works. So when we click on Facebook login, it says login wants to use Facebook to sign in. We continue. Now I've already logged in, so it doesn't ask me for my name and password, but would you like to continue? And I go yes. And it takes us to our home controller, and we're logged in. Now, if we just quit the application and run it again, we're still logged into Facebook. We're still logged into Firebase. So when we run the app, it's going to take us straight to our home controller logged in. And if we click the log out button, it's going to take us back to our login screen. And if we run it just one more time, just to make sure log out has actually logged us out. And there you go. So that completes our login screen. It's pretty easy to implement the login with Facebook API, but it's quite difficult to to follow the instructions and install it. So hopefully I've helped you install it. The coding wise, it's not that difficult. There you go. So once you get the API installed, the implementation is quite straightforward. If you have any questions about the tutorial, then please leave a comment below or hit me up on Twitter @SwiftAlmanac. Please subscribe to the channel, it's free, and check out our website at www.swiftalmanac.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.